Young woman saves wolf trapped in a snare. Years later the wolf reappears when she is alone in the forest, and what happens next is completely shocking and unexpected. Sophia loved the forest. She often said it was the only place where everything seemed to make sense. That day, as usual, she set off with her backpack, ready to explore corners she had yet to discover. But something felt different. The air seemed heavier, and the trail, usually alive with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves, was eerily silent. That's when she heard it. A faint sound, almost like a whimper. She stopped instantly, her heart racing. "What was that?" she whispered to herself. The sound came again, a little louder this time. It was as if someone, or something, was in pain. Sophia looked around. The trees seemed taller, darker. Despite her fear, she decided to follow the sound. Each step made the ground creak, as if the forest itself was warning her of danger ahead. As she got closer, the sound became clearer, a moan, heavy with pain. A shiver ran down her spine. Her curiosity pushed her forward, but fear nearly made her turn back. She took a deep breath and moved a few steps closer. Then she saw it. Through the trees, a quick glint caught Sophia's eye. There it was, a wolf, massive, lying on the ground. Its breathing was labored, its eyes half closed, as if battling intense pain. Its paw was caught in a metal trap. Blood oozed slowly, forming small puddles on the ground. Sophia froze. The wolf locked eyes with her, a gaze she would never forget. It wasn't filled with rage or threat, but with desperation. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst. She knew she had to do something. But how? The wolf was huge and intimidating. What if it attacked? Yet, there was something in its eyes, something pleading for help. Sophia tried to step back, but her backpack brushed against a dry branch, which snapped with a loud crack. The wolf immediately raised its head, baring its teeth. Sophia froze in place. "Easy," she murmured, her voice trembling. She wasn't sure if she was trying to calm the wolf or herself. The animal watched her intently, every movement seemed to heighten the tension. All Sophia had was her courage, or maybe her stubbornness, because she knew, going home without helping wasn't an option. Sophia stood there, unsure of what to do. The wolf continued to stare, unblinking. Its eyes were unlike anything she had ever seen, not just those of an animal, but filled with pain, exhaustion, and perhaps something more. Trust? She wondered if it was foolish to think so. Maybe it was just her own hope making her believe the wolf trusted her. Her hands trembled as she rummaged through her backpack. She didn't have anything particularly useful, just a bottle of water, a snack, a rope, and some old cloths she used to sit on the ground. "This will have to do," she thought, trying to stay calm. "Okay, wolf, I'm going to help. But you need to let me get close, all right?" Sophia whispered, unsure if she was trying to reassure the wolf or herself. She took a slow step forward, but the wolf let out a low growl, as if warning her. Sophia stopped instantly, feeling a chill in her stomach, but she didn't back away. "I won't hurt you. I promise." She crouched down slowly, trying to appear less threatening. Her eyes never left the wolf, and its gaze never left hers. For a moment, it seemed like they were both trying to figure out who was more afraid, her of the wolf or the wolf of her. Carefully, Sophia stretched out her arm and tossed a piece of bread from her pocket. The wolf moved its head slowly, sniffed the piece, and, to her surprise, took a small bite, as if testing it. Sophia felt a small wave of relief. It was a start. Minutes passed. Every move she made was calculated, slow, and the wolf seemed less agitated. When she felt it wouldn't attack, Sophia moved a bit closer. The trap was horrible, with sharp metal teeth clamping around the wolf's paw like a cruel mouth. The sight of dried blood mixed with fresh made her stomach churn, but she tried not to show weakness. "This is going to hurt a bit, but I promise I'll get you out of here," she said softly. Kneeling, she gently grabbed the rusty metal trap. The wolf growled loudly this time, but Sophia didn't back away. "It's okay. Just a little more." Using all her strength, she pried open the rusted metal. For a moment, she thought she wouldn't manage, but then, with a loud snap, the trap released. The wolf's paw was free. It let out a short howl and pulled its leg back, limping away. Sophia also moved back, unsure of how it would react now that it was free. The wolf watched her again, as if assessing what she had done. Sophia stood still, holding her breath. It could run away, attack her, or simply ignore her. But what happened was unexpected. The wolf took a step toward her, slowly, without baring its teeth. Sophia saw something shine in its eyes, something that looked like gratitude. She felt a tightness in her chest and, without thinking, said, "You're okay now. You can go." The wolf stayed for a few more seconds, staring directly at her, before turning and disappearing into the trees. Sophia remained sitting on the ground, her hands trembling and her heart racing. She stared at the empty space where it had been. "What just happened?" she murmured to herself. Part of her was relieved, but another part felt empty, as if that moment had changed something inside her forever. Sophia sat there, looking at the path where the wolf had vanished. The sound of rustling leaves and snapping branches faded until everything was silent again. She tried to process what had just happened. It was as if the entire world had stopped for a moment. The wolf was free. She had helped it. But why did she still feel that tightness in her chest? Standing up slowly, she wiped her dirt-streaked hands on her pants, trying to shake off the nerves. "Will he be okay?" she thought, glancing toward the direction the wolf had gone. His paw was too injured for him to walk properly, and the forest could be cruel to a wounded animal. Sophia knew that. Maybe he had returned to his pack, or perhaps he was resting somewhere safe. But what if he hadn't? What if he couldn't survive? These thoughts wouldn't leave her mind as she grabbed her backpack and started walking back home. The trees around her seemed darker now, as if they held a secret she wasn't ready to understand. With every step, she looked back, hoping, maybe, that the wolf would appear again. But he didn't. When she reached the edge of the forest, close to the village, Sophia stopped and looked back one last time. The feeling that she was leaving something important behind was almost overwhelming. She wanted to go back, to search for the wolf, but she knew it wasn't safe. Besides, the sun was already setting, and she knew her mother would worry if she stayed out any longer. Back home, she tried to act as if nothing had happened. But it was hard. The image of the wolf wouldn't leave her mind. During dinner, her mother noticed Sophia was unusually quiet. "Are you okay, Sophia? You seem a little off today." Sophia shrugged, forcing a smile. "Just tired. I walked a lot today." But inside, she was a mess. She wanted to tell someone what had happened but knew no one would believe her. After all, who would understand that she had helped a wild wolf? They would probably just say it was dangerous and that she should never have gotten close. So, she kept it as her own secret. That night, Sophia lay in bed but couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, thinking about the wolf. Was he safe? Was he in pain? These questions tormented her until sleep finally overtook her. Days went by, and Sophia returned to the forest whenever she could. She walked the same trail, listening carefully to every sound, every movement among the trees. She called out to the wolf, even though she didn't know his name. "Hey, it's me, Sophia. Are you there?" But all she heard was the wind and the rustling leaves. Each passing day, her hope of seeing him again grew dimmer. After weeks of searching with no sign of him, Sophia began to accept that she might never see him again. Yet something inside her told her the wolf was still out there, somehow. It wasn't just a thought, it was a feeling, as if they were still connected in some way she couldn't explain. Even so, life went on. Sophia tried to return to her routine, but every time she entered the forest, her heart would race a little, hoping, dreaming, that he would appear once more. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and leave a like if you love hearing touching stories about animals. Time passed, and Sophia grew up. The adventurous girl who spent afternoons exploring the forest was now a young woman with responsibilities. The carefree days of running through the trees without a worry about the time seemed more distant with each passing year. School became harder, her studies took up most of her time, and the demands of adulthood were beginning to show on the horizon. But despite the changes, one thing never wavered. Sophia never forgot the wolf. That memory remained a precious secret in her heart. Sometimes, in the middle of her busy days, she would catch herself staring out the window, thinking about the forest, the sense of adventure, and most of all, that gaze. Did he survive? Is he still out there somewhere? She wondered. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't erase the inexplicable connection she felt with the animal. Whenever she could, Sophia returned to the forest. It wasn't as often as before, but when she did, it felt like coming home. The smell of the trees, the sound of the river, all of it brought back memories of that day. She still walked the same trail where she had found the wolf, even though she knew the chances of seeing him again were slim. But deep down, she wasn't just searching for him. She was searching for a part of herself that seemed to have stayed in that forest. The years shaped Sophia in many ways. She became stronger, more determined, but also more cautious. The responsibilities of life brought worries, fears, and doubts she hadn't known as a child. Still, every time she thought of the wolf, she felt something different. It was as if that moment had been a turning point, a reminder that even the greatest fears can be faced when your heart is in the right place. One afternoon, after weeks of not visiting the forest, Sophia decided to go back. The day was cloudy, and the wind blew strong, making the trees sway and creak. As she walked along the trail, she noticed how everything seemed smaller now that she was older. Branches that once seemed out of reach were now within her grasp. Paths that once felt like labyrinths were now familiar. Yet, despite that, there was still something magical about the forest. Something she couldn't explain. When she reached the river, Sophia was overcome with a wave of nostalgia. It was the same place where everything had happened. She sat on a rock, watching the water flow. For a moment, she could almost hear the wolf's sound again, like that afternoon. She closed her eyes and sighed. "I'll never forget you," she murmured to herself. As she sat there, alone with her thoughts, she realized something important. That encounter with the wolf had taught her more than she had ever imagined. It wasn't just about saving an animal. It was about courage, empathy, and the strength to do what's right, even when it's hard or scary. That moment had shaped who she was and continued to guide her in every decision she made. As the sun began to set, Sophia stood up and started walking back. The forest seemed more alive than ever, as if whispering secrets only she could understand. Even though she hadn't seen the wolf again, she somehow felt that he was still part of her life. Maybe it was just a memory, or perhaps it was something more. What Sophia didn't know was that, somewhere deeper in the forest, two glowing eyes were watching her from afar, hidden among the shadows. She walked on, unaware, but the wolf was there. He always had been. It was a day that started like any other. Sophia woke up early, had breakfast, and set out to complete her tasks. The sky was overcast, but nothing unusual. After all, the weather had been like that for days, grey, threatening rain, but without any real surprises. By late afternoon, feeling tired, Sophia decided to escape to the forest for a while. It had been weeks since she visited the place that always helped her clear her mind, and deep down, she knew she needed a moment to herself. She grabbed her backpack, just like she used to, and headed down the familiar trail, paying little attention to the wind, which was starting to pick up. As she walked, the familiar sense of peace returned. The trees, the sound of branches, the smell of damp earth, it all made Sophia feel like she belonged there. When she reached the river, she sat on the same rock where she often used to watch the water. But something was different. The river seemed fuller, more turbulent. The waves crashed violently against the rocks, and Sophia felt a slight chill. Maybe it was better to head back. Before she could stand, a thunderclap echoed through the sky. The rain began suddenly, as if someone had turned on a faucet full blast. It wasn't a light drizzle, it was heavy, fast, drenching everything in seconds. Sophia quickly stood, trying to hold her backpack over her head for some protection, but the trail was already becoming slippery. The river, which had seemed agitated before, was now dangerous. The water was rising quickly, spilling over its banks. Sophia knew she needed to leave, but every step was a challenge. The rocks were slippery, and the dirt path had turned to mud. The wind blew so fiercely that the trees swayed as if they were made of paper. She tried to quicken her pace, but with every move, it felt like the forest was becoming more hostile. The rain grew heavier, and the river water began to encroach on the trail. Then it happened. A loud cracking sound, like a branch breaking, caught her attention. Before she could react, Sophia slipped. She tried to grab onto a tree trunk, but it was too late. The current reached her, pulling her into the river. The world became chaos. The cold water enveloped her, spinning her around like a leaf in the wind. Sophia tried to scream, but every time she opened her mouth, more water poured in. She tried to swim, but she didn't know where to go. Everything was murky, confusing. The roar of the current was deafening. Her only focus was to keep her head above water, but even that seemed impossible. For a moment, she managed to grab onto a rock. Her fingers ached from the strain, but the force of the water was too strong. She felt her hands slipping, and before she could find another hold, the current dragged her further away. Sophia had no idea how long she had been struggling. Minutes? Hours? Exhaustion consumed her body, and she began to feel like she couldn't hold on any longer. Is this how it ends? She thought, tears mixing with the rain and the river. She was alone, lost, and without any hope. That's when something strange happened. Amid the chaos, Sophia heard a different sound. A bark? No, that couldn't be. It must have been her mind playing tricks on her. But then she heard it again, louder, closer. And then she saw it. In the midst of the storm, on the riverbank, a dark figure moved. Two glowing eyes locked onto hers. And in that moment, Sophia felt something she couldn't explain. It wasn't just an animal. It was him. The wolf. Sophia blinked several times, thinking her eyes were deceiving her. Amid the storm and the chaos of the raging waters, those eyes shone like the only clear thing in the entire scene. It was him, the wolf she had saved years ago. It couldn't be a coincidence, but how had he appeared right now, when she needed him most? The wolf was on the riverbank, pacing back and forth, as if trying to find a way to reach her. The current was too strong, and Sophia couldn't control where the water was taking her. Everything was dark, wet, and her strength was fading quickly. Even so, she couldn't take her eyes off the wolf. It was as if he was telling her, "Don't give up. I'm here." Sophia tried to grab onto a floating log, but the river seemed determined not to let her escape. Then the wolf did something unexpected. He leapt into the water. Sophia froze for a second, unable to believe what she was seeing. The wolf fought against the current, swimming with all his strength toward her. Her heart raced. "He's going to drown," she thought, feeling a mix of fear and hope. With each stroke, the wolf got closer. Sophia tried to help, moving her arms and legs, but her body was heavy, and her strength was nearly gone. Just when she thought she couldn't hold on any longer, she felt something touch her shoulder. It was him. The wolf bit down on Sophia's backpack strap and began pulling her with all the strength he had. She could feel the determination in the animal. He wasn't going to give up. With each tug, Sophia felt the water becoming a little less violent. The wolf was guiding her toward the riverbank, but it wasn't easy. The current pushed them both, and her weight made the animal's effort even harder. Still, he didn't stop. Sophia looked at the wolf, and their eyes met for an instant. She didn't need to say anything. He knew she trusted him. After minutes that felt like hours, Sophia began to feel the ground beneath her feet. With the wolf's help, she managed to drag herself out of the water, finally reaching the riverbank. She collapsed to her knees on the ground, breathing heavily, as the rain continued to pour down on her face. The wolf was beside her, just as exhausted, but he didn't take his eyes off her for a second. Sophia was trembling, both from the cold and from emotion. She turned to the wolf, now lying down, trying to catch his breath. With tears in her eyes, she whispered, "You came back. You really came back." The wolf simply stared at her, making no sound, but she knew. He had recognized her. He knew she was the same girl who had once freed him from the trap. She moved closer, slowly, reaching out to touch his wet fur. The wolf didn't pull away. On the contrary, he allowed Sophia to touch him, as if this moment confirmed something greater. The connection between them wasn't just a memory. It was real. They were there together again, not by chance, but because they needed each other. Even without understanding how or why, Sophia knew this wolf was more than just an animal. He was her protector, her friend, something destiny had placed in her life. As she looked at him, The storm seemed less frightening, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: safety. They stayed there together for what felt like an eternity. The sound of the river was still loud, but for Sophia, everything was silent. It was just her and the wolf. And for the first time since she had fallen into the current, she believed that everything would be okay. Sophia was exhausted. Every muscle in her body ached, and the cold seemed to seep into her very bones. The wolf, though tired, stood alert. He looked at her and then at the dense forest ahead, as if he knew exactly what needed to be done. Sophia knew she couldn't stay there long. The storm showed no sign of stopping, and the riverbank was still dangerous. "You know where to go, don't you?" Sophia asked, even though she knew he couldn't answer. But the wolf didn't need to speak. He took a few steps forward and looked back at her, as if saying, "Follow me." Sophia took a deep breath, her legs trembling, but she stood up. If there was any chance of escaping, she knew it would be with his help. The path through the forest was anything but easy. The rain had turned the ground into slippery mud, and Sophia stumbled with almost every step. Low-hanging branches scraped her face, and the trees seemed even darker under the grey sky. The wolf, however, moved with certainty, avoiding hazards as if he knew every inch of the terrain. He stopped occasionally, waiting for Sophia to catch up. Even injured and tired, he didn't leave her behind. The forest felt endless. Sophia could barely see a few feet ahead because of the rain, but the wolf was always there, leading the way. There were moments when she felt she couldn't go on. The cold was worsening, her feet felt heavy, and the urge to simply lie down and give up started to creep in. But every time she stopped, the wolf turned to face her, his eyes steady and determined. It was as if he were saying, "You can do this. Just a little further." After what felt like hours, the wolf stopped. Sophia, panting and nearly out of strength, leaned against a tree to catch her breath. "What is it now?" she asked, more to herself than to him. That's when she saw it. The wolf was staring intently at something ahead, a raised area, shielded by thick trees that formed a natural shelter. It was a refuge. A safe place. Sophia felt a wave of relief, but her legs seemed unwilling to cooperate. The wolf noticed her struggle and came back to her, walking by her side as she took the last few steps. When they finally reached the spot, Sophia collapsed to the ground, exhausted. She could still hear the rain pounding, but the shelter blocked the icy wind and most of the water. As she tried to catch her breath, the wolf moved to a drier spot and lay down. He watched her, as if ensuring she was truly out of danger. Sophia looked at him and felt a mix of gratitude and awe. "I wouldn't have made it without you," she said, her voice trembling. Even knowing the wolf wouldn't understand her words, she needed to say it. The silence between them was comforting. For a moment, Sophia almost forgot about the storm outside. She closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing heart. When she opened them again, the wolf was still there, lying down, his eyes shining in the dark, alert to anything that might come near. Despite her exhaustion, Sophia knew this moment would stay with her forever. The wolf she had once saved was now the one protecting her. It wasn't just a coincidence. It was something greater, something she couldn't yet explain. Lying in that makeshift shelter, with the wolf by her side, Sophia felt that, for the first time since falling into the river, she was truly safe. The storm finally began to ease. The once furious rain now fell in light drizzles, as if the forest itself was sighing in relief. Sophia still lay in the shelter, her body exhausted but her heart calmer. She looked at the wolf, who remained close, lying near her but still alert to everything around them. It was as if he knew his mission wasn't over yet. "You saved my life," Sophia murmured, her voice low and hoarse. The wolf's eyes turned to her, glowing with an intensity that made it seem like he truly understood. She slowly sat up, her muscles still aching, and reached out to touch his fur. He didn't pull away, allowing the gesture, as if this moment confirmed what she already knew. They were connected in a way that went far beyond words. The silence was broken by a distant sound. The river still roared, but now softer. Sophia realized the water had receded enough for her to start making her way back home. Carefully, she stood up, her legs still trembling. The wolf rose too, watching her every move. For a moment, she thought he would follow her, staying by her side until she was completely safe. But then, something changed. The wolf took a few steps back into the forest. Sophia frowned. "Hey, wait. Aren't you coming with me?" she asked, her voice almost pleading. But he only looked at her, as if to say his part was done. She stepped toward him, but he retreated further, his paws already touching the shadows of the dense trees. "Please, stay," Sophia whispered, feeling a tear roll down her cheek. But the wolf didn't stay. With one last deep look, he turned and disappeared into the trees, as silently as he had appeared. She stood there, alone, staring into the forest, her heart heavy. It wasn't the first time he had disappeared, but this time, it hurt more. He had saved her life, and once again, vanished the moment everything was safe. Sophia took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears. She knew it didn't make sense to expect him to stay. He was a wolf, a creature of the forest, wild and free. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she had lost something important. When she finally managed to move, she began walking toward the village. The path felt longer than before, but Sophia felt different. It wasn't just the exhaustion from the storm or the aches from the current. It was something deeper, as if that wolf had left a mark on her. Not a visible mark, but something in her heart. The following days were spent recovering. Sophia told everyone about the flood and how she had almost lost her life. But she didn't speak of the wolf. Not because she didn't want to, but because she knew no one would understand. It was something just for her, a secret she would carry forever. Life went on, but Sophia never forgot. Every time she passed by the forest, she glanced at the shadows of the trees, hoping, perhaps, to see those glowing eyes again. But the wolf never reappeared. Years later, Sophia still thought of him. The wolf wasn't just an animal she had saved. He was a symbol of something greater: courage, loyalty, and the inexplicable bond that can exist between two lives so different. Whenever she faced a challenge, she thought of that day, of that gaze. It was as if he was still with her, guiding her from afar. The bond they had formed never faded, even though their paths had diverged. And Sophia knew, deep down, that wherever he was, the wolf would always be watching over her, just as she had cared for him that day, years ago. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Remember to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts about this story in the comments.